I remember the exact moment my hands started shaking. The gold plaque shimmered under warm chandelier light, reflecting a name I hadn't seen written like that in years. Mine. Not scribbled on a debt ledger. Not called out across a crowded street stall. But engraved. Permanent. Important. People around me were dressed in tailored suits, polished shoes clicking against marble floors. I could smell expensive cologne, hear soft laughter, the clinking of glasses. And there I stood, feeling like an intruder in someone else's life. I almost turned back. Because 10 years ago, I wasn't someone whose name belonged in places like this. I was just a street-side vendor trying to survive, waking up before sunrise to prepare food I could barely afford to eat myself. And more than anything, I carried a secret. A secret about a boy named Adrian Cole. A secret that no one, not even him, ever knew. I didn't come here tonight for recognition. I came because of a letter. No sender. No explanation. Just a sentence that hasn't stopped echoing in my head. You once changed my life. It's time I change yours. And as I stared at my name on that plaque, one question tightened in my chest. Who knew? And worse, what were they about to reveal? 10 years ago, my world was no bigger than a cracked pavement corner and a rusted food cart. My name is Elias Rowan, and back then, survival wasn't a goal, it was a routine. Every morning before dawn, I would light the stove, the smell of oil and spices filling the quiet street. By sunrise, the city would wake up, and so would the noise, honking cars, hurried footsteps, impatient voices. Most people didn't see me. I was just the food guy. But I noticed everything. I noticed who counted coins before buying breakfast, who skipped meals, who looked like they were holding their entire future together by a thread. Because I was one of them. There was no safety net for me. No family to fall back on. Just long days, longer nights, and the constant math of survival. I had one rule. No one who was truly hungry would leave my stall empty-handed. It wasn't good business, but it was something I couldn't ignore. Maybe because I knew what it felt like to have no one show up for you. And then one day, someone did. Not for me. But for the future I didn't even realize I was about to protect. The first time I saw Adrian Cole, he wasn't ordering food. He was standing a few feet away, staring at a folded letter like it had just ruined his life. He looked out of place, not because he was rich but because he carried something fragile, hope. I remember calling out, asking if he wanted something to eat. He hesitated. Then he walked over and admitted something most people would hide. He didn't have enough money. So I gave him a plate anyway. He ate slowly like he was trying to make the moment last. That's when I asked about the letter. He tried to brush it off at first. But eventually the truth came out. It was an acceptance letter. He had been offered a place at a university he never thought he'd reach. But there was a problem. He couldn't afford the fees. And the deadline was days away. I remember the way he said it, calm, almost detached. Like he had already accepted losing. And something about that didn't sit right with me. Because I had seen that look before. It was the look of someone giving up on a future they deserved. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment wasn't supposed to end that way. Adrian kept coming back after that. At first it was just for food. But then it became something else. We started talking. Not about small things, but about everything that mattered. He told me about his dream to study engineering, to build things that lasted, to prove that where you came from didn't define where you ended up. I didn't talk much about myself. Because there wasn't much to say. No big dreams. No safety net. Just the next day's survival. But I listened. And the more I listened, the more something inside me shifted. Because Adrian wasn't just talented. He was relentless. Even knowing he might not make it, he kept studying, kept preparing, kept showing up. One night, he admitted something that stayed with me. If I miss this chance, I don't think another one will come. He didn't say it dramatically. Just honestly. And that honesty hit harder than anything else. Because I realized something in that moment. Some people don't fail because they aren't capable. They fail because no one steps in at the moment it matters most. And that night after he left, I couldn't sleep. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice. Helping Adrian wasn't a simple decision. It was a dangerous one. Because I didn't have extra money. Every coin I earned had a purpose. Rent, supplies, survival. But his deadline was approaching. And I kept thinking about that letter. That one opportunity standing between him and everything he worked for. So I started counting. Saving. Skipping meals. Working longer hours. Selling more than I ever had. But even then, it wasn't enough. Not even close. And that's when I faced the truth I didn't want to admit. If I was going to help him, I would have to give up something that mattered. Something I couldn't replace. I stood in my small room that night, staring at the only valuable thing I owned. Something tied to my past. Something I had promised myself I'd never let go of. And for the first time, I questioned that promise. Because suddenly, it didn't feel as important as his future. I didn't tell Adrian what I decided. I couldn't. Because I knew he would refuse. So I did it quietly. I sold what I had. Took every bit of savings I could gather. And went to the administration office myself. I still remember the clerk looking surprised when I handed over the payment. Like someone like me didn't belong there. I didn't correct them. I didn't explain. I just made sure one thing was clear. The payment had to remain anonymous. No name. No trace. No connection. Because this wasn't about recognition. It was about giving him a chance without burdening him with debt or obligation. When I walked out of that building, I didn't feel heroic. I felt empty. Like I had just handed away a part of my life. But also, strangely at peace. Because for the first time, I knew I had done something that mattered. Even if no one would ever know. A few days later, Adrian came running to my stall. I had never seen him like that before. Breathless. Overwhelmed. He told me the fees had been paid. He thought it was a mistake at first. Then a miracle. Then something he didn't fully understand. I just listened. Pretended to be as surprised as he was. He kept asking who could have done it. I shrugged. Told him maybe the world wasn't as unfair as we thought. He laughed at that. But I could see the questions still lingering. Then came the part one wasn't ready for. He thanked me. Not for the money. But for believing in him. For listening. For treating him like his dreams mattered. And then, he left. Just like that. With promises to come back. To stay in touch. To never forget. And for a while. He did. Until one day. He didn't anymore. At first, the messages slowed. Then they stopped. I told myself he was busy. Adjusting. Building his life. Becoming who he was meant to be. And I didn't blame him. But silence has a way of growing. Turning small gaps into permanent distance. People in the neighborhood started talking. Saying he had moved on. Forgotten where he came from. Forgotten people like me. I never defended him. But I didn't agree either. Because deep down, I believed something else. Not that he forgot. But that life had simply carried him somewhere I didn't belong. There were nights when I wondered. Not about the money. But about the connection we had. And whether it meant as much to him as it did to me. Until eventually, I stopped wondering. And focused on surviving again. Just like before. Years passed. Quietly. Uneventfully. Until one morning something strange happened. A man in a suit stopped at my stall. Not unusual. But the way he looked at me was measured. Intentional. Like he already knew who I was. He ordered food, but didn't eat it. Just asked questions. About how long I had been there. About my routine. About my past. I answered carefully. Because something about it didn't feel right. Before leaving, he said something that stayed with me. Some investments take time to reveal their value. Then he walked away. No explanation. No context. Just that sentence. And for the first time in years, I felt that old, familiar unease. Like something I thought was long over. Wasn't finished yet. A few days later, I heard it again. Adrian Cole. Not in conversation. But on the radio. They were talking about a rising figure in the business world. Someone who had built something remarkable from nothing. The name caught me off guard. Because it wasn't just familiar. It was personal. They spoke about his success. His influence. His growing reputation. And I stood there listening. Trying to connect that voice on the radio to the boy I once knew. It didn't feel real. And yet, it was. That's when the questions came back. Not about what I had done. But about what he had become. And whether our paths were ever meant to cross again. The letter arrived without warning. No return address. No signature. Just my name written clearly across the front. Inside there was only one message. You once changed my life. It's time I change yours. And beneath it, a location, a date, a time. That was it. No explanation. No context. But I didn't need one. Because something about it felt deliberate. Like it was meant for me. And only me. I read it over and over again. Trying to understand. Trying to decide. Because this wasn't just an invitation. It was a choice. To step into something unknown. Or stay where I was. Safe. Unchanged. Forgotten. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. But somehow, people noticed something had changed. The same man from before returned. This time he didn't pretend. He told me not to go. Said things like this didn't happen without a cost. That opportunities like this were traps. That people like me didn't suddenly get chosen for no reason. And for a moment, I believed him. Because his words made sense. They were logical, grounded, safe. But something inside me resisted. Because 10 years ago, logic would have told me not to help Adrian. And if I had listened, none of this would exist. Doubt has a way of settling in. And as the day approached, I found myself questioning everything. The day came faster than I expected. I stood outside the location written in the letter. A place far removed from anything I had ever known. Clean, polished, intimidating. I could have walked away. No one would have known. No one would have blamed me. But something held me there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. Or maybe the quiet belief that some choices define everything that comes after. So I took a step forward. Then another. And as the doors opened, I realized something immediately. This wasn't random. This wasn't luck. This was planned. Carefully. Deliberately. For me. And as I walked inside, one thought echoed louder than anything else. Who has been watching me all this time? The doors in front of me were massive, polished wood, too heavy to look ordinary. I pressed my hand against the surface, and I felt something almost alive, like the building itself was holding its breath. I took a deep breath. My heart was hammering, not just from anticipation but from fear. What if this was a mistake? What if I had misread the letter, the clues, the hints I thought were there for a decade? I stepped inside. The lobby smelled faintly of old books and leather, something familiar, comforting, yet imposing. Soft footsteps echoed around me, and I could swear shadows moved slightly out of sync with reality. Then I heard a voice, calm, precise, yet unrecognizable at first. Elias Rowan. I froze. How did they know my name? No one answered when I called out. The only thing I noticed was a single envelope lying on a polished oak table. My name, written in Adrian's handwriting. I picked it up with trembling hands. Inside was a simple note. If you're here, it means you kept believing. Follow the hall to understand why. And as I looked up, I realized the hallway stretched farther than logic allowed. I stepped forward. Every step echoed louder than the last. A chill ran down my spine. Somewhere ahead, something or someone was waiting. And I had no idea if I was ready to see it. The hall felt endless, lined with framed photographs of people I didn't know. Or maybe I did. Faces blurred, accomplishments etched in gold letters, but one figure stood out, a young man with bright eyes and an easy smile. I stopped. My chest tightened. Could it really be him? Adrian? A whisper brushed against my ear. You did this. I spun around. No one. Just shadows and silence. I realized then, the past had followed me here. Every choice, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every coin I gave away, it had led me to this moment. I pressed on more confident. I had to see this through. The shadows weren't just shadows, they were reminders. The quiet, patient watchers of a decade of unseen kindness. And then I reached the end of the hall. A door slightly ajar. Light spilling out. I pushed it open. And froze. Inside, Adrian was waiting. But not as I remembered him. He was older, composed, powerful. But there was a softness in his eyes reserved only for those who truly mattered. Elias, he said, voice steady. You kept faith when no one else did. I didn't forget. I swallowed hard. Why now? After 10 years of silence? I needed to see if kindness could travel time, he continued, eyes glimmering. If someone would give without expecting, without recognition. You did that. And that's why you're here. I felt my throat tighten. The reward was no longer just material, it was recognition. Validation. But deeper, something spiritual, something almost magical. Why? I whispered. Because some debts aren't financial. Some debts, he said, are moral. And in that moment, I realized everything I had done, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the quiet generosity, had a purpose far beyond the transaction of paying fees. He smiled. Then he handed me another envelope. A final instruction, step outside. I stepped outside and the world had changed. A courtyard, impossibly large, lush with greenery, sunlight bouncing off fountains. Birds were singing. The air smelled fresh, almost surreal. And in the center, a crowd. People smiling, clapping, celebrating me. I blinked. Me. Adrian walked forward, hand extended. For 10 years you were my invisible guardian. Today I make you visible to the world. I shook my head. I never did it for this. You did it anyway, he replied. That's why it matters. At that moment, the entire decade of unseen acts, coins given to the hungry, encouragement offered quietly, nights sacrificed, felt worth it. And then I noticed a few familiar faces from my neighborhood. They were cheering too. Smiles full of pride, respect, and awe. I realized my small, quiet world had finally collided with something bigger. And I couldn't believe it. Adrian led me to a stage where a single podium stood. Behind it, a check. Not just any check, but a foundation of sorts. My name on it. $10 million. I froze. 10 million? My hands shook. Not for spending, he said. For paying kindness forward. For creating opportunities. For helping those like me who never had a chance. I thought about the street stall, the smells of fried bread, the clatter of coins. 10 million couldn't compare to that feeling of giving silently. And yet, this was a chance to magnify it. To multiply it in ways I never could have imagined. I nodded, words failing me. Then came another envelope. One that read simply, "Now it's your turn." People began approaching me, asking questions, wanting to hear the story of how I changed Adrian's life. I told them every detail. About the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the fear of failure, the quiet courage it took to help without expectation. And as I spoke, I noticed something extraordinary. The message resonated. People weren't just listening, they were inspired. I realized the moral was clear. Generosity isn't transactional. It's contagious. The more you give, without expectation, the more the world notices. Even if years pass. Even if recognition never comes. I saw tears, nods, small smiles. People taking notes, sharing stories. And I understood. Kindness has a ripple effect stronger than any currency. But not everyone believed. A man dressed in dark gray approached. Familiar face. Mr. Langston, a businessman I once knew, skeptical of everything. You gave him money? He asked, eyes sharp. For what? Recognition? Power? Ego? No, I said firmly. Because it was right. He laughed, bitter. Do you know how many people waste their lives on illusions? I do, I admitted. But I also know how many people never act when they could. And that's worse. He stared. His expression faltered. Then he nodded slowly. Even the skeptic couldn't deny the truth. Selfless acts, however small, leave an indelible mark. As the day unfolded, Adrian guided me to another room. Wall after wall of projects, scholarships, initiatives, all funded quietly in my name. It wasn't just a check. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a movement. A decade of my unseen kindness had blossomed into opportunities for hundreds, maybe thousands. I felt overwhelmed. Pride. Maybe. Humility? Certainly. Gratitude? Unending. And I realized something critical. Kindness is never wasted. Not ever. Even when it seems invisible. Even when the world doesn't notice immediately. It accumulates. It grows. It changes, lives far beyond the giver and receiver. And then, the antagonist revealed himself. A former rival of Adrian's, someone I had heard of in passing. Carl Fenwick, a man who had tried to sabotage Adrian's scholarship years ago. He stood across the courtyard, face twisted with rage and disbelief. You're rewarding him? He spat. After all he tried to take? Adrian smiled calmly. He never took. He gave. And that's why he wins. Carl's empire, built on manipulation and greed, began crumbling right before our eyes. It was poetic justice. His schemes exposed. His reputation destroyed. And I understood clearly, honesty, generosity, and moral courage always find a way to triumph over deceit. Adrian handed me keys, a literal place to start something new. A building, funded, staffed, designed to continue acts of kindness, scholarships, and mentoring. I walked in for the first time. The smell of polished wood, clean paint, and sunlight streaming through tall windows was intoxicating. Every room whispered possibility. Every desk, every chair, every blank wall promised creation. I realized this wasn't just about money or fame. It was about legacy. The ripple of small acts magnified. And I finally felt like I belonged. The final act came unexpectedly. Adrian organized a public gala. Everyone who mattered, neighbors, students, media. He introduced me as the silent guardian of his success. The applause hit me like a wave. I looked out at familiar faces, strangers inspired, even Carl Fenwick in silent defeat. For the first time in a decade, the story I had carried in secret was shared with the world. And it felt magical. Because it wasn't just recognition. It was proof. Kindness transforms, transcends, endures. That night I sat alone in the courtyard. Stars above. Wind whispering through leaves. I reflected on every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every coin I had given quietly. The moral was simple. Give without expectation. Act without witnesses. Love without reward. One day the universe, or a grateful soul, returns it in ways you could never imagine. And as I looked at Adrian, laughing with a new generation of students, I realized the final lesson. The smallest act of courage, of belief, of kindness, can ripple across a lifetime. I thought of Carl Fenwick, the skeptic, the doubters. They had their lessons too. Kindness always outlasts greed. Honesty always outlasts deceit. Hope always finds a way. And I smiled. Because I had learned the most important truth of all. What you give quietly can change the world loudly. Comment: what would you have done if no one knew? Like, if you believe kindness always comes back to you.